This is my laptop. Before I shot this video, it had one operating system. Now, it has 5. It shouldn't have been too hard to complete, right?
Okay, so, editing Hades here. I completely forgot the first part of my, the script, so I'll just read it out. First, I had to plan what operating systems I was going to use. I decided on Windows 11, Windows 10, Chrome OS, Linux, and Mac OS Big Sur. Windows 11 wouldn't require any work. It was already on my boot drive, which I'd taken out to make sure nothing was overwritten. So I just needed to work on the other 4.
We already run into our first problem in the planning process. I want Mac OS on this thing, but my laptop has a Ryzen processor and NVIDIA graphics. Typically, a Ryzen processor shouldn't cause too much trouble running Mac OS on a PC that isn't a Mac, but my laptop doesn't have any compatible graphics options. The integrated graphics wouldn't work, and neither would the dedicated. And even if the dedicated GPU worked, that would only let me use Mac OS when I had the system plugged into a monitor. I decided to install a light Arch-based distro and configure it to automatically boot into a Mac OS KVM. I knew the graphics performance wouldn't be great, but it would be barely usable. Now, originally, I wanted to start with Chrome OS, and the plan for that was to use Chrome OS Flex, which came out recently, because it was officially supported, but it doesn't support dual boot. No problem, I thought I'll just install Chrome OS Flex, then boot into Linux and change the partitions so I can boot 5 operating systems alongside Chrome OS Flex. But the Chrome OS partition configuration caused some major problems with Pop! OS. According to gparted, the partitions were overlapping? I've never seen that before in my life. Now, while gparted could ignore this and move on, the Pop! OS installer couldn't, and the entire drive was seen as unallocated space. Then I switched my focus over to the Brunch project, which allowed Chrome OS to run on normal PCs before Flex was even a thought in Google's mind. I mean, Cloud Ready existed, and Chrome OS Flex is just Cloud Ready 2.0, because Google bought Cloud Ready. But when Brunch was around, Cloud Ready was just Chromium. I'm glad I went with this, as Brunch gives you access to all Chrome OS features, including Android and Linux app support. Although, I did need to install Linux to install Brunch in a dual boot configuration. But that's fine, I was doing that anyway. I went ahead and installed Pop! OS and tried to install Brunch, and that's where I ran into another problem. Pop! OS does not come with Grub bootloader, it comes with systemd boot. While systemd boot is much faster for a single OS, Grub is just easier to work with for dual boots and also Pentaboots. Plus, it's more standard and I actually know how to configure it much better than I know systemd boot, because I don't know anything about systemd boot. I did attempt to install Grub on Pop! OS, but I just could not get it to work. I've done it before, but it just wasn't cooperating this time. With this new development, Pop! OS was out of the question for my Linux distro of choice. Unfortunately, it's fantastic in distro, and I decided on Elementary OS instead. Elementary comes with Grub installed, which is perfect. I went through the install procedure again, and while I was able to select Chrome OS in the boot menu, nothing happened. I went through a bunch of troubleshooting steps. I reformatted the partition that Chrome OS was installed on, I reinstalled it, I even purged my Grub configuration and reinstalled that, and then it hit me. The guide for installing Brunch calls you to find the partition you want to install Chrome OS on and mount it to a folder in your home directory. I forgot to mount the drive. I was just copying all the files to this one folder, and Grub was trying to boot from the partition. I mounted the partition, installed Brunch again, attempted to boot into the settings menu, and it worked. I configured the right kernel for my device, rebooted into actual Chrome OS, and it booted just fine. With Chrome OS and Linux both installed, I moved on to Windows 10. This was the easiest to install, a little sign in here, touch a Wi-Fi there, and I was good to go. I installed a bunch of programs with Ninite, and rebooted to get back to Linux. Oh shit. Windows had gone ahead and made itself the default boot option. No worries, I'm just one Google search away from fixing that. I couldn't change the boot order in my BIOS, but I can change it from within the command line on Linux. And now that Windows is done, it's time for Mac OS. Now, the original plan was to use Endeavour OS as my Linux distro and create a KVM on that. I've made Mac OS VMs in both Windows and Linux, and I've made them in Debian and Arch-based distros, so this shouldn't have been too hard. This was the most painful KVM experience I've ever had. I ran into problem after problem after problem, First my network drivers weren't working, then it wasn't booting correctly, and then my backup plan wasn't booting. I decided to just switch to Debian, or a Debian based distro. In hindsight, I probably should have used something like Lubuntu to keep the Linux host light on resources to give macOS as much as I possibly could, but I didn't feel like downloading another distro, so I just did another install of Elementary. The VM install went much smoother, but then I was having major problems with Grub. The second Elementary OS install overwrote the Grub of the first install. Essentially, I had to reconfigure it again. This wouldn't have been too much of a hassle if it wasn't for Chrome OS and its custom configuration. It just wasn't working. And on top of that, my Grub config files were completely different to what they were for some reason, so I physically could not add Chrome OS back to the boot menu. I tried reloading from backup, but that only caused Grub to keep throwing up errors every time I tried to save the config file. So I reinstalled Grub from a live USB again. Thankfully, this put the Grub configuration back into the hands of the main Elementary OS install, meaning I didn't need to deal with macOS automatically booting up every time I wanted to change something for Grub. I re-added Chrome OS, and it was time for the final test. Elementary OS, boots. Windows 10, boots. macOS, boots. Chrome OS, boots. Just kidding. You really thought it was just gonna work? Nah. But seriously, for some reason, Chrome OS just didn't work. I ended up just reinstalling because I seriously could not be bothered to troubleshoot. And everything would just sync through my Google account anyway, so. And with the reinstall of Chrome OS, everything worked. It was time to reinstall my Windows 11 boot drive, add Windows 11 to the boot menu, and witness the beauty of 5 operating systems in one boot menu. It wasn't worth it. This took ages to complete. This is how many hours of footage I had after I ingested it all. That's just what I bothered to record. So, thanks for suffering with me. If you like this video, consider subscribing. I post tech content like this video here whenever I feel like it. I also have a Patreon now. This video was uploaded to Patreon a day early, and it starts at just $3 a month. I wanted to make it $1 a month, but if only one person subscribes at that tier, I would be actively losing money, because the payout fee is $1.50. Yeah, I'm gonna go cry, realizing how much effort that took. You know what, actually, no, I'm not gonna cry, because some girl in my science class that I know said it was cool, so...